Welcome to Asian Book Club, where we highlight Asian and Asian American authors. We are your hosts,
Jamae and Sabangan.
and I'm Stephen Park, and today we bring you Read 2 of Aloha Vietnam by Dr. Nguyen. There's a part in this read that I wanted to bring up because it's a question that I think it's worth asking, because living in the States, we see breakfast as one thing. So the quote I'm going to read is from Schwann's perspective, and it reads, I miss having pho for breakfast. I can never understand how the American custom of cold milk and cereal nourishes one's empty belly in the morning. In fact, it feels like a rude awakening. I miss the comfort of a warm, soothing bowl of noodle soup with its soft, slippery noodles and tender pieces of thin beef and the aromatic smell of green onions and cilantro. The first warm swallow of rich broth awakens not only the Vietnamese belly, but the Vietnamese soul. That is, I think, a sentiment that is carried by a lot of Asian people and a lot of countries just outside of the US. So it begs the question, is a proper breakfast sweet or savory?
Well, I think a proper breakfast, when you put it that way, is savory.
What would be the implications for a sweet breakfast?
I think for a sweet breakfast, it's like a treat. Like if you want to do something different rather than a savory breakfast. Because savory breakfast is usually filling and full and something that's going to gear you up for the rest of the day. When it comes to a sweet breakfast, it's like, oh, it's going to be a very relaxed day. I'm not going to go out and do anything.
Hmm. So which one would you prefer then? Would your preference be for a sweet breakfast or a savory breakfast?
Although I like both, my personal preference is sweet breakfast. Like, I know in the Philippines, a lot of the breakfast items are silogs. There are a lot of savory things, but there is one breakfast item that's sweet, which I always look forward to, which is champorado.
And for people that don't know what that is, what is champorado?
It's like a chocolate congee or a chocolate porridge.
Yeah. So it's definitely on the sweeter side. It kind of has that, I don't want to say cheap, but it has that like cheaper chocolate texture. It's not like a refined, dark, 80% cacao chocolate. It's much more like a chocolate bar kind of chocolate taste.
Or like a cocoa powder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would necessarily say sweet or savory breakfast because I'm usually not the breakfast eating type. I usually skip over breakfast.
Hmm.
I'm trying to get stuff done in the morning, so rarely do I actually eat for that meal. I think because of that, I usually go to a savory quote unquote breakfast, which is usually more of like a lunch with breakfast items.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's a brunch if you really want to put a word to it.
There you go.
But I do like a little sweet start to the day when I do have to eat, which would usually include like a waffle, some oatmeals with like peanut butter or something of that sort.
Hmm.
But if I'm at home, if I'm with my mom, she always makes like a soup, a stew. Every Sunday morning when I was growing up as a kid, we would eat ramen before going to church, like the packaged ramen. So that is what I reflect on when I think of like my Asian breakfast. But I guess the American side of me does still crave a sweetness in the morning,
For sure.
which is also why we have so much diabetes in America. But if you find yourself eating maybe a little too much sweet or too much savory breakfast, there's someone that can help you with getting your heart and your body back in shape. And that's going to be our recommendation for the week.
Our recommendation for the week is Cassie Ho. Cassie Ho of Blogilates is a designer and fitness instructor. On YouTube, she has Pilates and yoga inspired videos. She also has an app called Body by Blogilates where you can find different calendars and community. She also has a cult activewear line through PopFlex Active. And I'm currently on an active lifestyle, and whenever I think about going back into fitness, I always go back to Cassie Ho's Blogilates videos because she's so hype and she's so joyful when she's teaching these classes. You can learn more about Cassie's work through her website at blogilates.com. That's BLOGILATES.com. And you can find her on Instagram and YouTube at Blogilates.
Yep, and that's going to be our recommendation for the week. Okay, so this is our second read of Aloha Vietnam by Dr. Elizabeth Nguyen. In this read, we have read pages 81 through 151, which were chapters 15 on 1992 through chapter 32 on 1993. What have we learned up till this point?
So far, An experiences her first manic episode and later discovers that she has bipolar disorder. She, her mom Xuan, and her dad Long struggle to confront and manage this reality.
Yeah, and in this read, we're continuing to go on this journey with An. It's a journey of self discovery. It's continuing to be told in the perspective of An, Xuan, and Dr. Tanaka. And we're currently in the process of her starting to take medication, but she's not a big fan of this medication.
Right. She feels like it dampens her senses and she stops taking the medication.
Right. And on top of that, she's starting to notice a big weight gain. She's no longer feeling like herself. So, beyond losing her identification in terms of her mental status, she's also starting to lose who she used to see herself as, which was a thinner Asian female.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think her experience with the medication is very similar to what I've noticed with my friends who've taken medication before, talking about it feels like there's a damper on their senses and they feel a weight. What's interesting is that my experience with medication is completely different. I have depression and anxiety, and I take medication to help manage the symptoms. And what's interesting is that when I take medication, I feel like there's a lifting of weight. There's no more burden, there's no more feeling down, there's more feeling like regular.
Right. For me, I kind of get where she's coming from because with recently being diagnosed with ADHD, I'm planning to see a psychiatrist to I'll talk about with this stuff, but my biggest fear is kind of what An is going through, which is a dampening of my senses. So when I first started going through this experience of trying to figure out if I've had ADHD my entire life, I was asked a question of like, what do you want from this? Like, what is the purpose of kind of seeking this out? And the purpose was never to actually gain medication. I'm a little afraid that if I do, then I'll no longer be able to think the way that I do. Like, the thought processes that I have actually help me at work. They help me be the person that I am and diagnose and treat and be able to come up with different ideas. And even in cooking, and like I could plan several different things at the same time. And I've learned to utilize that strategy. So I've always been afraid of pursuing any kind of medication because I don't want to lose that ability.
For sure.
What I've heard from friends, though, is that it's not that you lose the ability to do that. It's much more like things are organized. They explain it like everything starts going into shelves rather than just floating in the air like paper that you just threw up.
Hmm.
So I am saddened that this is the experience that An has. Like I said, it's one of the fears that I have about going through the process of medication. And the thing is, that's my choice. Like, I can go down that route if I want to. I think the hard part for An is that she never really had a choice in this. And this was pushed on her because of this new personality and this new feeling and symptoms that she's starting to experience and not really be able to have a chance to understand.
For sure. I'm also wondering if because she has that first manic episode that she's given a higher dosage than what's usually given at the forefront.
Yeah, and that's very possible. What we do know is that eventually she gets to a point where she's fed up, she feels better, and she kind of just wants to stop this whole thing, so she takes herself off the medication. This obviously doesn't bode well. It leads to a second manic episode in which she thinks a tsunami's coming and is afraid for her family's life.
Mm-hmm.
And this leads to another hospitalization that has to restart this whole process with lithium and restarting the conversations with Dr. Tanaka.
For sure. And this time around, rather than constantly fighting, it seems like An feels more defeated while Schwan is worrying so much about An's future.
Right. Clearly, it's not as simple a solution as anyone was thinking.
Right.
An is definitely starting to go along with the process because it seems like she might not be able to see another option.
Mm-hmm.
The one benefit is during all of this, there are moments where she has friendships that seem like they become valuable.
Yeah.
I think it's also from the perspective of Dr. Nguyen, who is writing this, and I can see the characters being ideal types of people that know how to hold conversations in the right way.
Hmm.
So the first person that we see is Lauren, and this is after the first manic episode. And Lauren is her friend from school. And when Lauren and An are talking, Lauren is listening. She is not interjecting her own opinion. She brings up an experience to create some form of relationship with An.
Yes.
But at no point is Lauren giving An advice or telling her that things will be okay or inputting her own opinions into the matter. And I think that's such a crucial part in dealing with someone who's struggling or trying to figure something out.
Right, exactly. Lauren has no toxic positivity, nor does she have any let's fix it attitude.
Right. Because that's not always what you need. Sometimes you just need someone to be there and to listen to what things are happening.
Exactly. And there's another person, a friend. Well, I don't know if we'd call her a friend, but An meets this person named Shelley during her second hospitalization. And Shelley provides her more with a sense of belonging because now she is with someone who understands what she's going through.
Right. Shelley is much more compulsive, much more out there.
Mm-hmm.
She seems like she accepts what's going on with her mental processes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's initially scary to An,
Yeah.
but I do think that it helps An in the long run of realizing this isn't something that has to bring you down. It could just be a part of you and the person that you are. And when An brings this up with Dr. Tanaka that she met Shelley, Dr. Tanaka's pretty happy that she got to meet someone that is also working on a part of who they are
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully has An feeling like she belongs and isn't just all alone within this process.
Exactly.
Speaking of process, it does seem like as An is going through her second rehabilitation, that she's starting to trust it.
Mm-hmm.
She's taking her medication, she's going through therapy much more regularly, but not only that, she's starting to complete therapy. Like she's starting to be in the process and talk with Dr. Tanaka about her real feelings.
Right. And with Dr. Tanaka, I think that's the biggest relief for An in that she's able to trust this adult rather than having to fight against her.
Right. And this is where I think it was so necessary to put the viewpoint of Dr. Tanaka in this book, because when we see her, all we see is this person who has given lithium to An or is the head of this facility and, dealing with a lot of kids and teenagers.
Yeah.
What we see when we get into the shoes of Dr. Tanaka is she cares so much about all the patients that she's seeing, but more importantly, the part of her job that she cares most about is creating these connections like she's able to do with An.
And other than that, when we see her perspective, we also understand that she's coming from a place where she hasn't experienced these things, but she has the tools to help them through these experiences regardless.
Right. This eventually starts to get on feeling more like herself. She is starting to paint again. She's starting to go back to some of her hobbies like boogie boarding. And it starts the process of transition from the hospitalization to graduating high school, then going on to college, which is at UC Davis.
Mm-hmm.
What did you feel about the part of this read where all of these major life events were happening?
I felt like it was going by really quickly, and I wasn't sure what direction we're going to be taken in because a lot of milestones in high school were not addressed, and we're quickly ushered into graduation. And in graduation, it was just that moment about the principal giving their descriptor for the class and all of them not liking it. And so it feels like we were rushed out of high school and then plopped right into college.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of felt the same thing, but it felt like there was a reasoning behind it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it is yet, and I hope it does get explained later on in our read. But what we do know is we start re entering her life when she is back at UC Davis.
Mm-hmm.
Cowtown. Like, do you know anything about UC Davis?
No.
So it's described in the book pretty well, but it really is a place that was known for not having much. UC Davis, though, does have a very promising vet program because that's where they are, Cowtown.
Mm. And so you mean vet as in veterinarian?
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure.
What we do discover within this process of her transferring to Cowtown is we see the difference in relationships between how An is going through this transition of going to a brand new space and how her roommate Jessica is kind of going through this whole process as well.
Mm-hmm. And the difference between what they're going through. With Jessica, she has her parents continuously checking up on her, and she has the freedom to drive around wherever she wants. Unlike On doesn't have transportation outside of Jessica, and her parents kind of let her just go through it on her own.
Right. And there's a quote in this that I think creates so much explanation to what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it reads, "It does not seem odd to me that my parents view their main duty in supporting me through college is by paying my tuition bills every quarter." It's honestly how I felt. Like, I'm so glad that my parents helped me with my undergraduate education. They did supply me with a car as well, and it was massive to have that. Like, I think a lot of the friendships I created may have been initially because of that car and just being able to drive around. But they also probably knew that I am such an introvert, I wasn't gonna really go anywhere fancy or like drive too far. But I felt like from that point on, I was expected to be at home for certain periods of time, but I didn't get any other communication. And like when I went to grad school, I would talk on the phone with my parents, but I remember my friends getting like these gift boxes and these care packages. And when it came to like finals time, they'd get a box of like hot Cheetos. And it was like a school plan thing.
Wow.
And initially I was like, "Oh, I kinda wish I had that, like, I wish my parents would do that for me," but it's just not something they know, it's not something that they would probably recognize as an option for, doing for their kids, and on top of that, they probably saw the price if something did go to them, and they're like, "Why would I spend more money on this box than just giving this to him?"
That's fair. I had a little mixture of experiences. I thankfully was able to live at home while I was going through my undergrad, and I didn't need those gift boxes. I didn't need anyone to coddle me, but because my parents did help me with my undergrad, that also meant that I didn't have anyone to guide me through what was happening in college. I had to figure all of that out. My parents were like, "You're independent, you got this, we know that you're smart, go get them." But when it came to me moving out here trying to get my master's, that's when it became different. My parents then started sending me gifts and sending me care packages, reminding me of home. So I don't think they would have thought of doing that earlier on, but because I'm the first one to leave and the first one to leave so far away, I think that's why they wanted to give me those little bits of home.
I also think, though, that it's a part of your culture because you
Hmm.
even have a name for those boxes.
True, balikbayan boxes.
Yeah, so I think when you're at home and Guam is really small, so you're never really leaving them. And I do feel like that probably was an input as to why my parents never felt the need to do those things, was because when
Hmm.
I did come home, my mom would have all this food cooked for me, and my parents would be there to like, I don't know, order me to wash the lawn or something. I don't know. Like I would have to do things, but it was always like there was a sense of love when I would come home.
Hmm.
So I guess there wasn't always a sense and need to show that love through a gift that was mailed.
That's fair.
The other part that you kind of mentioned was that your parents didn't help you with the process of the education.
Right.
And I think that's common for a lot of Asian Americans. And it's not just the fact that their parents aren't willing, or because I think most Asian American parents are so invested within their kids' education,
Hmm.
and it feels less of an unwillingness to help, but a lack of knowledge of how to navigate the American education system.
That's so true.
Within this read, what we see from An is just a difference between how she mentally prepares for going through this process of undergraduate compared to her roommate. And the way she explains it is, to me, choosing classes felt like choosing the direction of my entire life, and that decision will lead to the success or failure, my parents' approval and pride, or disapproval and rejection. It really does feel that way sometimes. And I remember when I was going through the process of undergraduate, I had to figure things out on my own. I had to figure out what classes I was going to take, how I was going to proceed. But my dad was in the background looking at my GPA still and be like, "Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing this?"
Mm.
And it seemed to weigh very heavy on the decision making process of I needed to be successful so that everything my parents went through would show that sign of success.
Exactly.
The other portion of her going to UC Davis highlighted something that An had always been thinking about. And that was her never feeling like she was part of something, or the way that she questions it is, am I always going to be on the outside of every social circle?
Hmm. All she wants is to feel normal or whatever normal is, quote unquote.
Right. Is something we all want in a certain sense. And when I saw this quote and I read it, I thought about my own high school experience because I feel like high school is such this bubble that you feel more of a need to fit in than anywhere else in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Because everywhere else outside of high school, you start finding your own people. And it's this realization that the circle that you're trying to fit in isn't the only circle that exists.
Right.
Outside of that circle is also another large circle of other people that have different interests, and this circle has weirdos that love D&D and books, which is me, which is why I call them weirdos, and there are other people that love sports, and then there are other people that love murder novels and podcasts. And I think what An doesn't quite realize yet, and with her feeling consistently separated from everyone because of her diagnosis or because of the way that I think our Asian upbringing kind of traps us with having to fit into certain stereotypes, so having to work and not be able to go through high school parties and these experiences and that experience, it makes it feel like you truly aren't ever going to fit into the big social circle.
For real. I empathize with On because I feel like I'm back in that stage where I don't know where I fit in and I'm trying to figure out what that means and who I am. And I think part of that is the transition in life that I'm in, trying to find a nook or a niche where I can blossom.
Yeah, and the big secret is that's life. That's
Hmm.
what we're given is you're not in one social circle forever, or hopefully you're not. Like there are some people that are the high school football captains and that's their entire life is I was a high school football captain and they never leave that.
Right.
But ideally, like you're growing and you're changing who your belonging is. So, like for me, I grew up with sports and playing basketball, and then I found friends that played basketball, and then we kind of started doing other things, and then I became a runner, and then now I'm a
Hmm.
PT, and now I do weightlifting, and now I'm like, it's one thing after another. And for other people, it's like I go through undergrad, and then I find out who I am. I'm an engineer, I'm a pharmacist, I'm something, and then I have a child and this is my baby. And so now I'm a parent. And so now I have parent friends. And then those parent friends grow up. So now I have these friends that are post parent friends. And some people get divorces. So now I'm a part of this divorce group and I'm fighting dating at a later age. So I think our identity shouldn't be so firmly defined in a social circle. It's social circles and belongings and places that you can go in and out of and find what feels the best for you.
Absolutely.
There's also a podcast called Asian Book Club that you can always be a part of that you'll be accepted because we honestly don't know who you are on the other side. So,
Well, we don't know until you tell us.
right. This read, I think, brings a lot to the surface. I think it puts a lot of thinking with identity and, like we've just talked about, personal belonging.
Hmm.
It still doesn't feel heavy. It still feels like it's a form of self-discovery, but I'm reading through it through such a light perspective.
Hmm. For sure. It does feel light, but it also feels long.
Yeah,
I think the reason why it felt so long this time around was because we're going through so many chapters and they were so short and like little vignettes, and we didn't get any full dives into any one scene.
right. It does feel like we're following her emotions on this journey.
Mm-hmm.
And we did go from her first manic episode when she's in high school all the way up to her starting college. So
Right.
it is a lot of life events that we have kind of followed her with.
Mm-hmm.
But we are coming down to our last read, so we'll kind of see where this all comes out and see how the ending goes.
Absolutely.
So for that, what are we reading for our third read?
For our third and final read of Aloha Vietnam, we are reading pages 152 through 223. That's chapters 33, Xuan, 1993 through 50, on 1997 and the epilogue.
Yep. And for people that do want to reach out to us, and we are always an open community as long as you're accepting and you're willing to not pass judgment to other people, how can people reach out to us?
Y'all can respectfully reach out to us through email at asianbookclubpod@gmail.com or through Instagram at asianbookclubpod.
Yep. And we have our website, which is asianbookclubpod.com, that has our bookshop with books that we've read in the past, books that we recommend, and books that we plan to read in the future.
And a great way to support us is to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast.
Otherwise, make sure to be happy, be healthy, and read a book.
Ingat! Bye!
Bye.